Master of Deceit from RFA Stories.
This series tells the story about Shujin Wang and his journey from a scholar and activist to a man who the U.S. Justice Department has called a master of deceit. Mr. Wang's story is also a story about the meaning of loyalty, of patriotism, about what it means to belong to a community filled with paradoxes and complexities, and to be caught in a bigger game of geopolitics where rules are forever shifting. In the first episode, my colleague Tara McKelvey and I look into Mr. Wang's secret life. In the second episode, we put his story in the larger context of the U.S.-China spy war. In the third episode, we delve into the Chinese diaspora community and the impact of this case. Through this podcast, we'll also follow the trial in Brooklyn. And then in the final episode, we'll look at the aftermath.
Edelweiss, Edelweiss, every morning you greet me, small and white.
That was Shujin Wang, a 76-year-old Chinese American who's at the center of this podcast. He's singing from the sound of music. If you're not familiar with this work, it's a movie musical from the 1960s. And Mr. Wang says it's one of his favorites. When he sings, it's quite operatic. His life recently has become quite like an opera too. In 2022, Mr. Wang was accused of working for the Chinese Ministry of State Security, the Beijing spy agency. His criminal trial is set to begin in July in Brooklyn, New York. He faces charges related to espionage and lying to the FBI. He strongly denied the charges.
Bless my homeland forever.
肉体上的痛苦你翻译一下 That's the matter 就分别你现在反顾成有罪了你我就
In spy stories, there's always a park bench. Two people sitting next to each other having a secret conversation. And there was Mr. Wang sitting on a park bench right outside the courthouse, like in a spy movie.
我主持了30多场反对中共
Mr. Wang's in his 70s, trim and broad-shouldered, with a playful manner that makes him seem decades younger. This wasn't the first time we'd spoken to him, and it wouldn't be the last. But I remember how on this warm, late summer day, he wore his trademark suit and tie, one with bold colors, the kind his ex-wife still complains about. When he talks about the case, he straightens his labels and yanks them down indignantly. But who is he really?
So I'm a famous big professor in China. I come here and now I'm being accused by being a spy by the U.S. government and arrest me.
他们都不知道我爸爸是美国司令的翻译啊
有你上次有跟他讲 He said you don't understand my dad is the work for the U.S. military as a translator
我爸爸给美国司令叫
Mr. Wang tells me he's a famous professor and he can't believe he's been accused of being a spy. He says his father was an interpreter for the U.S. military at the end of World War II. That was in Qingdao, the port city where Mr. Wang grew up. Back then, Mr. Wang watched old Hollywood movies like Waterloo Bridge and grew up in a musical household playing the trumpet. He was under the spell of America and its music and culture and values. It's these values, he says, that later inspired him to join the pro-democracy movement. When he sees me, he gives me a salute, just like his father used to do before the American officers. Mr. Wang says it's a sign of respect.
对我本人其实具有那种
The reason that I got involved in the pro-democracy movement was really because of my family. My father, actually. He was very Western in a lot of ways. He was an interpreter for a U.S. Navy commander. Everyone in my family, we were all influenced by my father. We admired Western values like democracy, freedom, a society based on human rights, and the rule of law. Also, My decision to go to Columbia University was connected to the massacre at Tiananmen Square. When it happened, I was filled with rage and fury. I said, I don't want to live in China anymore. I want to go to America.
Mr. Wang arrives here in September 1994 for a 2-year term as a visiting scholar at Columbia University.
我是1994年哥伦比亚大学做访问学者。我当时
When I arrived here in the United States, I flew into New York and it was night and it felt like I was stepping into a dream world. The city below, it was brilliantly lit up and I thought, it's like a magical land. The impression that the city made on me was very deep from the plane, and I looked down and I saw lights shining everywhere down below. They looked like stars in the sky, and I was so totally amazed.
Mr. Wang joins up with others on a pro-democracy movement in New York, and in 2006, he's part of a group that forms the Hujiao Foundation, a group that fights for democracy in China. He works in a gift shop to make ends meet, and he writes books.
著书里说的时候，那是我一个非常难忘的这个。
The rest of the time I could focus on my writing, and at the time, I was working on my Pacific War trilogy. More than 1 million words. The publisher had gotten in touch with me directly and said, well, we want you to write this book and finish it by... And he gave me a deadline and he said, is that okay? And I said, it's okay.
你要写个什么书，什么时候写完，行不行？我说 OK。
Mr. Wang's books sell well in China, but it turns out the book he considers his masterwork, The Legend of Qilang Zhang, about a decorated military commander, is partly plagiarized. My colleague Jane got a hold of records about it from a Chinese court. Mr. Wang seems unfazed, blazing ahead as a writer and always singing.
Every morning you greet me, small
A showman.
He has one of the most beautiful voices out there, and very loud too. So, yeah.
That's David Yu, the executive director of the Tiananmen Museum in New York. He studied economics at Princeton, and he's known Mr. Wang for years. They worked together to put on exhibits and to commemorate the Tiananmen protests. He admired Mr. Wang for his talent as a showman and also as an organizer. But like many of the people in the pro-democracy movement, he was also wary. Some suspected that Mr. Wang was double-crossing them.
An academic and an author in Queens is accused of living a double life to spy for the Chinese government. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of New York unsealed an indictment today against Shujin Wang, an American citizen who was arrested on Monday. 4 Chinese intelligence agents are also charged but remain at large. Prosecutors say Wang helped start a pro-democracy group in Queens. He allegedly used his position to spy on Chinese dissidents, Hong Kong pro-democracy activists, advocates for Taiwanese independence.
Collect information on dissidents in order to target them and in some cases to imprison pro-democracy advocates abroad. One case...
It was March 2022 when Mr. Wang was arrested, and Jane and I were curious, or really fascinated by the allegations that a pro-democracy activist had betrayed his friends. One of the goals of the Chinese agents is to infiltrate pro-democracy groups so they can intimidate them and maybe soften their impact. The U.S. prosecutors said Mr. Wang had kept a diary where he recorded his friends' activities and reported them to Chinese spy masters. It all seems so literary and intriguing. Who is he really? Is he a patriot, someone who loves America the way he says, or a spy? When I walk into Mr. Wang's lawyer's office in Queens to meet him for the first time, I nearly trip and set off his Verve song on my phone. I'm nervous. Can't believe he's agreed to talk to us journalists. Seems like a risky move. But, as I learn, he likes to take risks.
May I have a seat here?
Okay.
No, here. Just here?
Yeah, here.
I'm in a conference room, and just outside, I can see the lawyer's private office. A desk, chairs, all covered in documents. Some are for Mr. Wang's case. Some of it's just chaos. The prosecutors also have mountains of documents. All of these briefs, memos, spooling out in offices and in the courthouse. They help to shed light on the inner workings of the Ministry of State Security and the human factor in all of this. That's Mr. Wang, sitting across from me, wearing a red, white, and blue tie, and smiling. Some call him an operator, Lao Yo Tiao. It means old dough stick, someone who can't be trusted. He lives in a one-bedroom in Flushing with his books, a piano, 2 cats, and uses plastic-wrapped spoons to stir instant coffee. He visits family in China, but according to the U.S. Justice Department, these trips are not so innocent. And there's another side to him, one that doesn't fit in with his seemingly ordinary life. On one trip in 2016, he has dinner with 2 Ministry of State Security officials. He's known them for a while. They meet regularly with his son-in-law to talk business. This time, they've invited him to a fancy restaurant. The 2 agents, Boss He and Little Lee, meet him in an upscale neighborhood in Hong Kong near the harbor. Little Lee opens a cigarette case and offers Mr. Wang a Chinese cigarette, a double happiness.
So my friends and I, we like talking about things that others would consider to be a little risque. And that's why I told them stories about Zhang Shuilang's love life, because I have the interviews with him. And I've listened to them more than 100 times, and I know those stories very well. So I shared stories with them, and they all seemed to love it. People who study history, we like to tell stories.
Mr. Wang says his son-in-law had an arrangement with Boss He. The boss collected on a loan for him. Mr. Wang says his son-in-law shows him an envelope with cash worth about $6,000 US dollars for Boss He. Whoa, that's a lot, Mr. Wang says. His son-in-law says, he helped me a lot. And so the boss and his son-in-law, as Mr. Wang explains, they get along well.
I told him that Zhang Shuiliang is an honest man, and, some men have affairs and they keep things secret, but he was upfront about it. He said openly that he had 11 mistresses. He wasn't like one of those people who hide things like that.
Later, Mr. Wang gets a message from Little Lee on WeChat. Gradually, Mr. Wang starts to give them information about his friends in the pro-democracy movement. He tells them about a human rights activist who speaks with Uyghurs, and about a phone conversation with someone described in the indictment as Hong Kong dissident. Jane confirms it's a lawyer, Albert Ho. According to the prosecutors, Mr. Wang passes his phone number on to the Chinese agents, and then his friend, Albert Ho, is thrown in jail. In the spring of 2019, border agents at Kennedy Airport bring Mr. Wang into an interview room. He's back from China, and they ask about his contacts with the Chinese intelligence. He denies even knowing them. At this point, and at other points in time, Mr. Wang can see the FBI is after him, but he stays in touch with the Chinese agents. It's what you might describe as risky behavior. Like Mr. Ripley in Patricia Highsmith's novel, Mr. Wang relishes the secret nature of their relationship. As Highsmith wrote, risks were what made the whole thing fun. Then, in July 2021, an undercover FBI agent comes to Mr. Wang. He thinks they're there to help with maintenance work. But the visitor speaks Mandarin and talks about the Chinese intelligence service, says he was sent by the Chinese agents. He warns Mr. Wang that the FBI is watching him. The undercover FBI agent says he can help cover his tracks. And so, Mr. Wang gives him his password and asks him to delete some of the messages he's written to the Chinese agents. He says to keep some messages so the FBI won't know that he knows he's being watched. All of this is secretly recorded by the FBI. It's March 16th, 2022, and the sun's just come up.
A spokesman from Chinese embassy, Peng Yuliu, would not comment on this case. But Peng Yuliu said the Chinese government does not run espionage operations here in the way that U.S. officials say. In an email to us, said, the U.S. government and media have frequently hyped up the topic of Chinese spies, many of which later proved to be unfounded.
全是推论，哎，这我的证据。
No, they have no evidence. It's all speculation. I've read through the indictment, and you know what all those charges are about? It's because I'm working on a book. I'm collecting materials, and they looked at my computer and said I'm working for the MSS. It's all nonsense. The books I write are done to oppose Chinese authoritarianism.
Mr. Wang is open about his communication with the Chinese agents, something that surprises me at first. He talks about their exchanges on WeChat, but says it's just a casual conversation and that he's done nothing wrong. He says he's shared notes with the Chinese agents, but the notes are for a book he's writing about the pro-democracy movement. There's nothing classified or even secret. The investigators say he was providing sensitive information to the Chinese agents. They say that the information he gave to the Chinese did not lead directly to the arrest of the lawyer Albert Ho, but was part of the ministry's larger effort to track him. Mr. Wang says the FBI is just completely wrong.
Make a mistake.
Trying to understand Mr. Wang and his motives is complicated. I ask him if he feels like he's betrayed his friends, if he feels he's disloyal. He tells me loyalty is for simple people, like those in China, loyal to the communist government.
你问忠诚这个词，我们现在确实有点陌生。
If you're talking about being loyal or loyalty, well, that's what people were doing during the time of Mao. It was true, blind loyalty. It meant chanting, "Long live Chairman Mao!" That's what they called loyalty.
Mr. Wang says life's complicated. Sometimes people lie and they cheat on their wives or their husbands. It happens. Dogs are loyal, he says dismissively. A cat, though. He takes a sip of tea. After many months and many hours with Mr. Wang, Jane and I wonder if we're any closer to the truth. Can anybody ever really know someone else? Even when they're your close friend?
You say that the FBI, the Justice Department, that they don't understand you. They don't know who you really are. So who are you really? When you look in the mirror, who do you see?
Oh, 这个，那么谈到我自己呢，
Me? How do I see myself? Well, I'm a good person. I'm an unusually nice person. And I'm a very disciplined writer.
It's just that you interacted with this individual as if he were your friend. He acted as if he were your friend.
That's David Yu, the executive director of the Tiananmen Museum.
He gave me a book he wrote and said, and signed it, and it's like a very friendly. And then you realize this is all superficial. What he was really doing was trying to gather as much information about me and others as possible. So, yeah, it's unpleasant. It also makes you wonder, who else is there? I guess you have to just have to be more careful. Sometimes you don't want to be that close to other people, right? You want to interact with people to express your ideas. But now you are forced to sort of scale back a little bit and first try to decide whether this person is trustworthy, whether there's any chance that this person, in fact, is here to gather information about you for the Chinese government before you get into anything that is in any way sensitive. So that's why it feels very unpleasant and just annoying, I guess. In Wang Shujun's case, he was so sneaky. We could have said things about our private lives, our family, children, whatever, at dinner tables. And he might have reported all that to the Chinese government. It's a really a little bit disgusting, ask me.
The head of the Hu Jiao Foundation, Ayame Zhang, says Mr. Wang has a soft side and could be thoughtful. She says she had surgery years ago, and he came to her house and brought her oranges.
I don't know. I really don't know. Because we know that Wang Shujun is not necessarily an evil person. No. Right? It's difficult to judge people if he's not evil. If he's evil, easy. You are evil. Okay. But he's not. But he's doing something bad. And also sometimes something is good. It's very difficult.
这个新闻，这个新闻挺大的。
It's like a bracelet, right?
Yeah.
How is the bracelet? What's it like?
Very comfortable. 它设计
What's
的
that cute
多
thing
科技了。
the bunny fur?
The story the prosecutors tell of Mr. Wang, the man before me wearing an electronic monitoring device cushioned with terry cloth, is of someone who's deceitful and cunning. It's completely at odds with the image he projects, a patriotic American who's innocent, a man who, as his friends say, can be thoughtful, considerate. And there's huge disparity between the two accounts. It's like there's two completely different people.
我入了美籍，我是美籍华人，我宣誓就效忠美国。
My country.
应该说
I'm a U.S. citizen. I'm Chinese American. I swore my allegiance to the United States. I'm not only sincere in my loyalty to America, but I also fight for the principles of democracy and freedom. And that's how I got in trouble. If I wasn't so desperately loyal to America, if I didn't fiercely uphold American values of democracy and freedom, if I just lived an ordinary life not worrying about these things, then nothing would have happened to me. I love America so much that I got into so much trouble. America, I've been tripped by mistakes that were made here, and only because I love this country too much.
就是因为太爱美国了，所以事情很可笑吧？
When I say goodbye, he holds his hand together over his heart. He turns to head home, and then he looks back and gives me a salute.
Next time on Master of Deceit. Are the US and China in a spy war? And are people like Mr. Wang the only ones who are caught?
Hungry for more RFA podcasts?
Want to hear interviews and analyses with RFA journalists and find out how RFA's stories are born?
Do you want to explore the sillier side of RFA's content with bad puns, memes, and mindless banter?
Mindless? If you said yes, then check out the RFA Insider podcast.
Visit rfa.org/English/insider or find us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get podcasts.
So yeah, check it out.